Right. Okay. There we go. We're off. Okay. Welcome then to the next lesson. So we've been looking at, as you know, we've been looking at insects and things. And last week we'd cut out some stencils of insects we've been looking at, and we'd found an artist who uses lots of geometric shapes and kind of almost creates a design out of the insects as well. We also talked about creating a leafy background or a stencil to create a background as well, and then sponging gently but with a bit of firmness on the top as well. So in other words, taking care whilst you're sponging is really important when we're doing this. So flies everywhere. Right, so I'm going to show you, I've got a new artist to show you, and really a lot of the inspiration for this whole project has come from this, apart from somebody asked me to do a project on insects. But this artist is really inspiring because he uses insects basically, and it's quite an old artist now. So it's an artist that was born in France in 1977 and developed lots of design work looking at insects using an Art Deco sort of style as well. So really beautiful work that I'm going to show you. So we'll go over to the wall. Look. Right, so you'll remember all of these things from last week. We were also looking at the artist Matt Moore. You can see just poking out of the middle there. That was some of the inspiration for the geometric shapes. And the reason I've introduced the geometric shapes is so that you can see how to start breaking down those different shapes that these insects come in. So, I mean, a lot of these insects already have these shapes, but this is kind of a little bit about adding and turning it into a design. So you'll need a couple of stencils. So we've got the blue one over there, which is the detail one with the geometric shapes and so forth. And then in the middle, we've got the silhouette. And then over on to the right there, we've got the actual silhouette stenciled. So what I did last week is I stenciled the black one, and then I applied the shapes back over the top. And you'll remember me then working into it and refining and bringing in some more detail and patterns. So really having a lot of fun sort of exploring what we can do with this. The other thing I did was used quite a limited colour palette as well, so as not to get too complicated with the colours. But you can add other little sort of highlights of colours in there as well as we go on. So I'm just gonna, I'll leave Matt Moore up there for a minute, but I'm gonna bring up this artist. So his name is oh gosh, I can't remember now, hang on. That's it, Emile Allain Sewguy. I don't know how to say it exactly, maybe someone can correct me on that. But the artwork is, if you remember, I started off our project looking at things like this, and in fact what we've done is we've done biro drawings, we've done pencils, we've used watercolors, we've done all sorts of things and created a mixed media kind of composition, a lot like this one. And I actually took my inspiration for this project from some of this kind of work, because I thought it'd be really fascinating to create the layering and also to look at composition. All right, now some of the work from the Art Deco period has these really stunning colour compositions where you've got both plants and insects layered on top of each other to create these very textile kind of looking designs, I suppose, which is I find particularly inspiring for that reason, being interested in that sort of thing at university and things. But again, we've got some nice clean shapes, and these could almost be a stencil. I suspect they've been done, if they were produced as fabrics or something like that, would have been produced using screen printing and so forth. So, oh, hang on, I think I've frozen here. Oh, there you go. Right. Yeah. actually you can see his name just down the bottom there. He produced many sketchbooks and designs like this, and he's probably one of the most distinguished Art Deco designers of his time. He's recognised as being so as well. But I thought I'd show you these. I came across them today, if I'm honest with you. So what I'll do is I'll put them on my screen so you can see them. But what I intend us to do is develop our own designs by repainting or painting in some ideas back over the top, which brings me to the insects that we've been looking at as well. Okay, so we'll go over to my desk. Ta-da! Right, there we go, and zoom in a little bit here. So I'll do a little bit of painting now on here just to show you what I was up to if you missed anything last week. But look, you can see on here how I've taken, this was the stencil, which is kind of rough and ready if you like, but it gives you a really nice kind of map to work from. The other thing is, of course, with a stencil is you can keep doing them. You could do a few different ones and then work back over the top. So I stuck with these colours, but I added a yellow, so that would give me a chance to mix the paints and create a bit more variety. So the colours that I was stenciling with was a black and a white, but also Vitalio green and this cobalt blue over here, which I've got some really big tubs of. And then I've also got this nice yellow, which I've been mixing in with the other colours. Now, some paints in acrylics are naturally kind of transparent. They have a transparency or not an opaqueness, a lot like some of the paints that you have, like a white, for example. So with most of these colours that I've painted on this darker background, what I've done is added just a touch of white or more white, depending on what I want to do. So I'll do a little bit on here now. So when you're working with the acrylics, remember that they do dry out quite quickly, especially in this weather, and I think I mentioned that a few times last week. So add a touch of water. I'm going to put a touch of white with the blue, and that just makes sure that that paint is going to be really nice and creamy and opaque. And then give it enough fluidity so you can move the paint around, it doesn't dry instantly. If you find your paint is kind of going a bit hairy, I always call it hairy, but dry is probably the correct thing, then all you need to do is just add a touch of water. Okay, you don't need to add loads of water. This isn't watercolor, we're actually painting it quite thick on the surface here. So you twizzle the old brush round a little bit so you get a nice point, and then don't feel too limited by the shape itself. If you think it could benefit from being a little bit neater, then use your brush to do that. Or even look often on the design, you can see just above here, I've added extra ideas and details. So I've just painted in, I'll do the other one as well, with a pointy brush. So this is a round, I call it a pointy brush, but it's actually known as a round brush. So paint in there. You might need a bit more if you're painting directly on black. And then whilst that's wet, just get a little bit of white on your brush, mix it with a bit of the blue, and just a touch of water again. So all I'm doing when I get a touch of water is literally touching the surface of the water that I'm using, and that just dampens it a little bit more. So I'll zoom in a little bit closer. There, that's about as close as I can get at the moment. And then start applying your white next to the blue. And if you find you've got too much paint on there, which is often the case, just wipe your brush a bit, add a touch of water, and then you should start to be able to mix the colours where they meet. So you end up doing a nice blend between one and the other. Now once you've done that, you might think, oh, it's not quite, that's good, but it's not quite right. So you might then start adding a little bit of more paint. So you can see I've just added I've added pure white on there. But while the paint is wet, I can blend it in. So it won't be pure white anymore. It'll be sort of a very pale blue. And you can see I'm blending it in. My brush is hardly wet at all at this point because I've got enough moisture on the surface there to be able to do it. So this is a really, if you haven't used much acrylics before, it's a really nice exercise, just literally to take the shapes you've got in your insect and start to practice doing a little bit of blending. So this other segment that I've got here is probably by now already dried off. So I'm just going to put my white on like this, and then I'm quickly going to get some more of the blue, mix it with a touch of white, and just go over it. So you'll find as you work with acrylics that they become dry, obviously dry very quickly, but the nice thing about them is it dries so quick you can just work over it, and you can paint over anything you feel is not right or you've made a mistake on. And if you find the paint
3D look to it now then, Jamie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I've done that with this. If you look at this here, this leg, what I did there is I put the white in the center, or I did sort of a pale green, and then I put a white in the middle of it, and that lifted the shape of that leg up a little bit as well. Okay, and then what I was doing last week when I was playing around with this is I got some of the yellow, which is runoff, put it on my plate over here, mixed in some white with the yellow. So I do it, look, I'm taking it from the blob, not mixing the whole blob of yellow, so that I can do some more with that, because you don't want too much of it, you just want a little bit. And then I could say, right, I'd like to have a nice white or yellowy white line going there and there. And it's almost, if you mixed it nicely enough and it's not too dry and definitely not too wet, you should be able to hold the brush firmly like this. Oh, and then drag the brush along the surface like that. So when I started doing this last week, I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do, but I knew I was going to limit my colours and I wanted to make it quite decorative. So some of the ideas, like these bits coming off of his eyes just there, I took inspiration from one part of the insect, which was this bit here, these kind of weird pincers, but I've used that as a decorative idea on other parts here, and the eyes look nothing like that. So there's the eye and there's the eye there, but I've just kind of had a bit of fun at the same time with it. All right, so that's that. If you get to it, you can put your insect straight on, you can stencil your insect onto the top of your design, your background that you made last week, and then once that's done, you can start painting in like this. I did this one as an example really, but if you're ready, you've got your background, you can start painting your insect on top. So this is the stencil. So I did first of all the silhouette of the insect, and then my cardboard cutout that I did the first week we started this on top, and then what I can do from there is start painting some of these ideas onto this one, and then the insect will start to appear off the back, and then we should start to have something a bit more like the work that I just showed you, which is some of this stuff just here. So we're aiming to create something with these nice bold colours. Although I will say, again, limit the colours that you use. Remember we did the colour wheel earlier on. You could go for two opposite colours, let's say red and green. So you've got in that top one on this, you've got red and green there, look. And then you've got one harmonious colour, which is a yellow next to it. Red, green, yellow, and then some black outlines. And there's a bit of green in the background, okay. All right, so that's the idea for this evening. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. If you haven't got a bug stencil, but you've got a nice background and you just want to get on with the bug, putting him on, and you don't want to do any more cutting out, then you could quite easily just draw the bug over your background, paint it in with a dark colour, and start adding your shapes and things into it and start painting it, okay? Because I know we've been stenciling for a couple of weeks now. All right, so how does that sound to everyone? Does that make sense? Yeah, brilliant. All right, so if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to ask, because that's what I'm here for.
Can
Okay, so here we go. Working on the bug that I stenciled last week. I did actually add the green shapes on just before we started this evening, but here you can see me starting to apply some of the colour. So remember the one from previously, I added some white, some titanium white to my colour, and that was in order to make some of it a little bit more opaque and stand out a bit better when applied over the darker background. You sometimes need to add more layers of colour back over the top, and I think I go back over these eyes. You can see me painting here a little bit later on. But use a small round brush for most of the work in here. Make sure that your acrylic paint, as I mentioned before, is nice and damp but not soaking wet as if you were using watercolours, which I've seen people doing sometimes. So make sure that your paint is kind of runs a little bit smooth so that you can paint nice lines and so forth, but also almost kind of neat once you've mixed the colour that you want. If you apply one colour next to the other, it's usually quite easy to blend as long as the paint is wet enough. If it's not wet enough, or damp enough I should say, then just dip the tip of your brush into the water and then go back to the paint, mix it slightly and then continue. And you should start to see that the paint goes on quite nicely, especially with a bit of titanium white. So you can see the green that I've just applied there at the pincers at the front there. I did use a little bit of titanium white with my yellowy green there. So we've got the lemon yellow mixed with a bit of the Vitalio green in order to create this brighter colour, and a little bit of titanium white as I mentioned earlier. So there you go, you saw me just applying a little bit more white on top of the eyes there, and now I'm just enhancing the edge of the head by adding highlights with white or yellowy white. I do go back in right at the end and add some darker areas. One of the things to think about while you're working is also contrast. A lot of this insect is going to be merging in with the background because I'm using very limited colours, but you'll see me now applying kind of an orange, like a nice bright orange in here, and this is mixed with a touch of white as well. So the orange there will pop right out of the picture and will pop against or contrast nicely against the blue leaves particularly. Now as I'm progressing around this, I also decide to bring in a little bit of yellow. So the colour is quite flat at the moment, but once I start adding some yellows in here, it starts to sort of blend across a little bit and be quite interesting. Some of the yellow obviously being harmonious with the blues and greens as well, and the orange being opposite the colour wheel to the blue. And then a bit later on, well actually now you're going to see me, I just drew these lines on before in pencil, but you're going to see me sort of adding in some veins onto the leaves here, and then I decide to enhance it with this kind of turquoisey colour, which is Vitalia and white, Vitalia green and white. So you know, you can do this sort of thing, but once you've done it, there's no reason why you can't go over the top and brighten up areas or even darken down areas. But I quite enjoyed enhancing this leaf. It brings out that leaf a little bit more, but also it kind of goes a little bit more with the insect as well. It kind of matches the insect a bit, but it doesn't have quite as much detail, so still has some degree of separation from the subject. So here, rather than using a stark black outline, which would actually merge too much with the insect, I've used a little bit of a yellow outline on one side of the leaf and a darker green on the other side. So at this point I was thinking a little bit about shadows underneath the head, and now I'm going to go with a darker colour on the leaf. If I get my head out of the way, you'll be able to see. There we go. So a little bit of a darker blue on here. So this is just a little bit of black mixed in with a cobalt blue, just to tone down the blue a little bit more. And I don't have to paint every single leaf therefore that colour. I can leave it that colour and maybe add a different colour to the other leaves, or slightly lighten it. I don't get that far this evening with that, but you see here I'm now applying, and this is the nice thing about acrylics, you can apply one layer of colour on top of another. It will dry very quickly and it won't be disturbed once you start working back over it. So the colour underneath is quite permanent once you've put it there, so you can then start to layer your colours on top of each other, which is a really nice thing about acrylics that I love. It dries quick and you can keep building over the top, correcting things that you didn't like, changing things that you didn't like, and so forth. So again, here I'm darkening down this green leaf, and you can see how that brings out that little bit of leg from the insect, which in a few minutes I'm going to paint back into and lighten up to give a bit of contrast between the leaf and the leg as well. So there you go. The joins that were originally on the stencil, I removed those and paint over the top, and I'm adding a few details in, then adding a highlight on the leg like I did with the last one, and a bit of colour, and then finally with this leg I do actually outline it, but first we're just, obviously you can see, putting in some stronger yellows next, which blends quite nicely in with the orangey background. So we've got a little bit of colour change going on right there in the back, which again enhances it, makes it interesting. It doesn't take away from the design because it's still quite simple. And that is as far as I get this evening, so I hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any questions, please send me a message. Cheerio!